What's going on, guys? Derek here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. And in today's video, it's a mock draft. It's Monday. You guys know the drill. It's a 12-team PPR. I'm picking from the 3 spot. I don't think that I've done a mock draft from early position. I could be wrong. Some of these mock drafts, they kind of blend together. But I'm going to be picking from the 3 spot, and I'm doing ESPN. I did want to do Fantasy Football Calculator, but I tried for like 30 or 45 minutes trying to get at least a somewhat full lobby, and I was unsuccessful. I do think the ADPs are competitive, and I do think the players draft a little bit better, I should say, on that site, but that would be negated. All those benefits would be negated by having only 6 of 12 people in there and basically having 6 auto draft. The most competitive part is in the beginning rounds, and if they go strictly off of ADP, then you're going to be getting values if people are auto picking. So I opted to avoid it. As we get closer to the start of the season, I think that will certainly change. I think no matter which resource you go to, it's going to fill up. But as for today, I am going to have to do ESPN. While their ADP is a little bit off, I'll make sure that if something sticks out to me as too great of a value, I'm just going to avoid it completely. But just to make it more realistic, but I don't think we're going to be running into too many of those problems. I have the 3rd pick, it's really between the big top 3 guys. I'll let the music play and we'll come back here. When I say those top 3 guys, I'm basically going to be getting Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, or David Johnson. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. At the 3rd position, I would have them ranked Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, then David Johnson, but you could make a case for any one of them. Even Zeke has a case for being taken 1st overall. That being, he only played in 10 of 16 games last year and was still top 12 at the season and in season standings, and then on points per game he was 3rd. So he doesn't really need to have a huge receiving floor in order to be productive or to actually finish as the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd running backs in the entire season. But it's going to help. Obviously, their offense is missing some weapons. I mean, let's be real, Dez Bryant wasn't all that great, but we did see Dak Prescott struggle at times, and only having Allen Hurns and Cole Beasley and Terrence Williams as his true weapons, you can't really expect too much from this offense, especially to put them in position to have scoring abilities. I chose David Johnson, but I know there's a ton of Cowboys fans out there that would gladly take Zeke to be a homer and to also get fantasy points while still rooting for their favorite player. Now, I think sticking with Dallas, I think Allen Hurns is interesting. But people are talking a lot about the exit of Dez. I don't think they're talking enough about the exit of Jason Witten. Jason Witten had a lot of those shallow routes, and I don't want to say dump off, but basically safety valve and high percentage targets for Dak Prescott to throw, something that he's incorporated in his game to be one of his strengths. I think Cole Beasley is going to fit into that role nicely, and if you're in a 14-16 team PPR league, Cole Beasley should probably be a target for you. He's realistically going to get some usage. They have to throw to somebody, but I don't know why in the 1st round I'm talking about Cole Beasley. Let's talk about the stat of the day. So the stat of the day on Friday was which offensive tackles, 2 of them, which team had 2 offensive tackles that were in the top 6 in pass blocking efficiency. The answer to that was San Francisco 49ers. So Nick Alvarez, congratulations, you're on the board. You guessed the San Francisco 49ers had 2 of the top 6 offensive tackles in pass blocking efficiency. So we're going to stick in today's stat of the day. We're going to stick to the offensive line. We're going to go from highly rated offensive lines to low rated offensive lines. Which offensive line group, so again, which team allowed the most pressures in 2017, okay? So which offensive line team allowed the most pressures in 2017? If you get that right, we'll add your name on the list of winners and get you your points on the board so you can win a prize. And speaking of prizes, we are having a giveaway. We are giving away a signed Martavis 8x10 photograph. I'm going to ship it to you right away come July 2nd, which is actually a week from today. I'm recording this on the 24th. Today's Monday the 25th for you guys. I'm going to be shipping this out to you and picking a winner for you guys. Nick and I are in a week from today. So make sure that you sign up. All you have to do is follow both Nick and I on Twitter and subscribe to the channel, and you're automatically entered to win. This is 1 week away and we haven't had many entrants, so you have a legitimate shot at winning. Back to the draft though. My pick is coming up, and let's take a look if we have any surprises here. So Odell Beckham actually was the 5th overall player taken. That's going to surprise a lot of people, and in recent years, having 2 wide receivers in the top 5 isn't unlikely. But with the recency bias we have about all the running backs being amazing and all the receivers being garbage, we don't really see that. Odell Beckham, I do think, is hands down the 2nd best receiver. I think there is a case for DeAndre Hopkins to be ahead, and I know I'm in the minority with thinking Odell Beckham's better than Hopkins. But I do have him 2nd. It is surprising to see him as the 5th overall player taken. I have to get ready for my next pick though. I have David Johnson. The choice is between Devonta Freeman and Mike Evans, and personally I think this is a really easy pick. I'm going to go with Mike Evans. I know a lot of you guys would prefer the safety of having 2 running backs, and I just don't think there's a ton of upside for Devonta Freeman. Tevin Coleman's contract's running out. There is a very strong chance that they want to use Tevin Coleman a little bit more than they have in previous years. They also want to keep Devonta Freeman healthy. Devonta Freeman didn't show us a ton last year. I know he was battling injuries, but this offense as a whole doesn't look to be taking a huge step forward. The offensive coordinator that they had last year after moving away from Kyle Shanahan, he did struggle. And that's not to say that he can't improve upon that this year. I just don't think, for me personally, I don't think that it's a situation that I would want to bank on. Mike Evans, however, can be top 5 at his position. Jameis Winston may be suspended 3 games, but if that provides value for you in the draft, you have to jump on that immediately. I am looking to go running back here, and Larry Fitzgerald's a great receiver in PPR, but I do want to get another running back. I have Mike Evans. I don't want to go 1 running back and 2 receivers. I'm going to get Jerick McKinnon over Joe Mixon. I think that Jerick McKinnon is the riskier of the 2. Joe Mixon, let's face it, he's going to be getting a very large market share of this offense. Jerick McKinnon, we are expecting to also get a high market share, but we've never seen him handle that type of workload. So it does present some risk. And I mean, Jerick McKinnon hasn't necessarily been this poster child for efficiency. He struggled severely as a rusher, and as a receiver, he's been good. He's been able to catch the ball, but what he's been able to do with it after the catch has not been very good. And what he's actually struggled in the most has been turning his touches into touchdowns. He has very low touchdowns based on his career averages for actual touches, and that should be concerning because we know that they brought in Jerick McKinnon to be the guy in between the 20s, but would it be, super surprising if they took a guy out if they took him out and put another guy in the goal line? It would kind of make you raise an eyebrow, but considering what they've seen of Jerick McKinnon in his career, it really wouldn't be kind of from left field, let's put it that way. Now, I don't have a pick for quite some time, so I am just going to kind of see what jumps out at me in ADP. So Doug Baldwin just went as basically a 4th round pick, and I think that's insane value. Doug Baldwin and the Seattle Seahawks team have lost nearly 200 touches, or 200 targets I should say, from this offense, and plenty of not only targets but red zone targets. You have Jimmy Graham leaving, who's been a red zone monster. They only had 1 rushing touchdown all of last year, and Jimmy Graham had a ridiculous amount of targets within the 5-yard line. Those targets should go to the running back, but with such a poor offensive line, they're going to be looking to air that ball out. And I think if you want a piece of this offense, getting Tyler Lockett late is a good strategy. But I think Doug Baldwin is going to be the biggest beneficiary of this increased target market share. Of all of these targets that have migrated away from the team, I think Doug Baldwin's going to get the most of them. They do have a very tough schedule, cornerback schedule, and when I say tough, I mean tough. You got Darius Slay, Kyle Fuller, Jason Verrett, Casey Hayward, Xavier Rhodes, Richard Sherman, Marcus Peters, and that's just to name a few off the top of my head. Those are elite guys we're talking about. These aren't just, solid corners. These are elite of the elite. But the good news is, I think that most of that coverage is going to go to Brandon Marshall if he's not cut in training camp. I think that, obviously Doug Baldwin playing from the slot is going to help him avoid some of that. He doesn't always play from the slot, so he will see some of that. But, he's going to get some of that nickel safety coverage more than anything, I think. So Wilson's going to opt not to throw to those types of those receivers covered by those corners, and that should also benefit Baldwin. So I do think there's a lot of upside, and I know this is a tangent, but I think that there's a ton of value in taking Baldwin in the 3rd, 4th round. So Kenyon Drake, Alex Collins, I do like. I've been dropping Kenyon Drake a little bit just because all the news is just so confusing right now. I think the winner is Alshon Jeffrey. Let's see. I would love to get another running back, but I think if I have a choice between Alex Collins, Royce Freeman, Ronald Jones, I'll be fine. I don't think Alshon Jeffrey will make it back. I do like Alshon Jeffrey more in standard. In Jarvis Landry, I don't want to say I like him more. In my rankings, I still have Alshon over Jarvis Landry. I haven't been picking Alshon much at all, but Jarvis Landry I do have ranked below him, and I do think he will be involved in this offense. I just think that the ceiling is higher for Alshon Jeffrey. He was able to put about 900 yards up and I think 9 touchdowns with a torn rotator cuff. If that news was true, that's insane and good for Alshon Jeffrey. I'm hoping he can work on improving that. And in his contract, we have told you guys about receivers joining new teams struggling off the get-go. So having seen that type of production initially on what's going to be a good offense, one of the best offenses in 2018, I think he could end up being an 1,100 10 touchdown receiver potentially. Jarvis Landry, he's going to need to make up all his production in the receptions, which I'm sure he can do, and that's no problem. But Tyrod's strengths don't necessarily match up to the strengths of Jarvis Landry. He's always been more of a passer who opts for the deep passes, doesn't really target the middle of the field, and that could be a product of the receivers that he's had in that offense, being Kelvin Benjamin, Chris Hogan, players like that, and not really having any of those guys for the middle of the field. But that's an assumption. We don't know if it's his strength, and I'm not saying Jarvis Landry is a bad pick. I'm just making the case for Alshon over him. So we have Kenyon Drake, who's following. I like Alex Collins more than I like Royce Freeman. Very close though. So I do think I'm going to go Royce Freeman. I do have Sony Michel a little bit behind them. I think Sony Michel is a guy who is going to get more of the increase in opportunity with Julian Edelman being out those 4 games. I think the value is almost impossible. Look, the value is almost impossible to pass up Jarvis Landry in the 5th, but I am going to have to do it, and you guys will see why. The running backs fall off a cliff. The running backs fall off a cliff right about here. You get Isaiah Crowell, which, who wants to own Isaiah Crowell? Not many people, but I mean, I will own him just because he's the only guy that has a true opportunity to lead this backfield. Marlon Mack's also a great pick, but I mean, you got guys over here that aren't going to really accomplish much at all. Whereas you go to wide receiver, I already have Mike Evans, Alshon Jeffrey. The only thing I would be able to do is to flex my next receiver. which would be Jarvis Landry, which is a great flex. But then I'm really going to have no running backs. Jerick McKinnon presents risk. David Johnson, while he isn't very risky, the offense itself, you know, it's not strong. He's not as locked and loaded as, in my opinion, Le'Veon Bell. And if I leave myself with just Jerick McKinnon and David Johnson as my 2 RBs, and then by the next time my turn gets around, I'm picking between Tevin Coleman, Tariq Cohen, or Lamar Miller as my RB3, no thanks. As an RB4, that's great. Those guys, Tariq Cohen, Lamar Miller, that's a great RB4. But if I still keep Mike Evans and Alshon Jeffrey, my wide receiver 3 in that range is going to be someone like Devin Funchess, who I love. Even Randall Cobb. Preferably, I'd like Randall Cobb as a wide receiver 4. But, I mean, the value is going to be there as a wide receiver 3. I think he can easily hit wide receiver 3 value. The only reason I say I want Randall Cobb as a wide receiver 4 is because that's what I've been able to get him at for most of this offseason. So it kind of just sucks now having to pay up for him. And I mean, it's part of my own fault. I've written like 3 articles, including Randall Cobb as one of like the best values on draft day. Not like I have a real impact, but I think that it was just glaringly obvious that Randall Cobb was coming in at a value. And that's why it sucks to get him as a wide receiver 3 versus a 4 like he used to be able to. But yeah, look, now we're talking even later in the draft. You've got players like Marquise Goodwin, who I think is great. Josh Doctson, Alan Hearns, 115th overall. He can be an easy wide receiver 4. Tyler Lockett, another great pick. I like Christian Kirk as a wide receiver 5. There's just so much depth at the wide receiver position. Even if you go all the way down here, you have Godwin, Terrell Pryor as a high upside, you know, boom bust. Not boom bust in his weekly production, but like he's one of those guys you can grab and then just drop after a week. You know, or 2 weeks after you see he's buried on the depth chart and not going to be part of this offense. Danny Amendola, the guy who's brought in to fill that Jarvis Landry role. And just a ton of upside players. Cole Beasley, we talked about him. You won't need to draft him or anything, but you know, there's just plenty of receiver options. You go to running back. The only real late round running back I feel like everybody is sleeping on. Let's see what he's ranked. That will probably go undrafted. Is Kenneth Dixon. Kenneth Dixon's the only guy who I think is going undrafted that everybody's sleeping on. So let's see. Lamar Miller would have been a nice pick right here. I also like Marlon Mack. I might get Marlon Mack, but let's see. Devin Funchess. I think I want Devin Funchess. I'm not high on Garcon. I'm not high on Crabtree, Brandon Cooks. I do like Watkins, but I like him much better in standard than I do in PPR. So I'm going to get Funchess just to ensure that I get him. He might fall back to me. Let's see. I want to get Funchess and Marlon Mack. So Devin Funchess as my wide receiver 3, and then I want to get Marlon Mack. I like all these guys very, very similar. So all these guys in this range. There's a couple I'm not touching, like Pierre Garcon, not touching. Michael Crabtree, also not touching. I mean, I say not touching, but if I'm getting these guys in like the 8th or 9th round, obviously I would take them, but they're not falling that far. And when I say not touching, I mean in areas where I would like to draft them, they're never available. Sammy Watkins, Corey Davis, and not Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp I value lower, but Sammy Watkins and Corey Davis, those are 2 guys I think are very close to me. I do like taking those guys, and depending on which side of the bed that I wake up is which one I actually take. I don't think I made a definitive case for which one's the better pick, but the only thing is I chose Funchess, who is obviously rated as a much lower ADP. I really like Funchess this year. I think he showed us enough last year, and they didn't bring enough additional weapons to ruin his value or even hurt him. So I think he's got a safe floor, and dude scored plenty of touchdowns last season, so I think he has some higher upside. Kerryon Johnson's great, but I will opt for Marlon Mack. I do have Marlon Mack ranked ahead of him. I think he is a clear tier above all of these guys. Kerryon Johnson we'll talk about him in a sec. So we talked about Randall Cobb, right? We talked about Cobb, how he has went from an 11th round pick to now he's like a 9th round pick. Kerryon Johnson went from a 12th round pick to I think he's in the 8th round at this point. Yeah, well, actually, technically he's in the 7th in ESPN, but not in regular leagues. He's not going in the 7th, but he probably will. I think he could be 7-11 right now. Let's check ADP. So we're gonna go to PPR. This is Fantasy Football Calculator, guys, and you guys should be using this for your ADP or running back. And I'm gonna find Johnson. Okay, so Kerryon Johnson. Wow. Okay, so he is 6'12". He's rated as the 6th round, 12th pick in the 6th round. That is insane. So I'm gonna click on him and I'm gonna show you guys just how much he's moved. Yeah, that's insane. So you see here, it's gonna load up. He went from the 12-11, so basically a 13th round pick, to the 702 it's showing, but actually we just saw it was the 612, and that's in 30 days. He went up, what is that, 5 rounds, almost 4 or 5 rounds. That's insanity, guys, and he's just going to continue to climb. Nick thinks he's going to just continue to climb until he's, you know, picked right up there with all of those sure things. And let's talk about where he stands on that. So with Kerryon Johnson, yeah, you have LeGarrette Blount there, who is supposedly going to be the red zone guy, but LeGarrette Blount sucks. Okay, if you don't think Kerryon Johnson, a guy that they moved up to get him, can take over that role, then I mean that's silly. Blount has been serviceable. I just think he's getting a little bit too much credit because he's been on really good teams and really good offenses. He went from the Patriots to the Eagles. And then you have Theo Riddick, who is the receiver, but Riddick's been shown to get hurt, so there is a realistic path for Kerryon Johnson to kind of have his hands in on all sides of the field, have his hands in all aspects of this offense that we know is a good offense. Now, I think Kerryon Johnson comes into a situation similar to that of Joe Mixon last year, although he's just not getting the type of hype. Joe Mixon, remember, was a 4th round pick, but he was coming into an offense where they had Jeremy Hill, which would translate to the LeGarrette Blount, and then you have the Gio Bernard. The Gio Bernard would translate to the Theo Riddick. So I'll touch back. Let me see. Ooh, Kyle Rudolph is suggesting me. I like that suggestion. And just make sure nobody else stands out to me. Wide receiver. I think Deshaun Jackson's ranked way too high in this format. I think he's almost undraftable. I don't even suspect that he's going to keep his job the entire season. Let's see. Kyle Rudolph for sure. Let's see my roster. So I have David Johnson, Jerick McKinnon, Alex Collins, Marlon Mack. I do need to get some more running backs for sure. Marlon Mack presents risk. We don't know if he is going to keep the job. Obviously, Nyheim Hines is not any threat to him keeping his job. We tend to lean on the scenario that Andrew Luck's going to come back and he's going to be healthy. He's not going to be top 5 quarterback this year, but this offense is going to run smoothly. It's going to be much better than it was under Jacoby Brissett, obviously. So nothing to be worried about. But either way, Marlon Mack presents risk. Alex Collins does present risk. Like I said, I think Kenneth Dixon's a great value. I think he's going to start to creep in and get some work from Alex Collins, and he does have the potential to take over. You know, Kenneth Dixon hasn't shown us enough to make that realistically a situation that you should be fearing, but it is something to keep in mind. So yeah, I don't think there's any running backs. Nick Chubb is a guy who I would like to target. Zay Crowell as well. I should have prepared for this a little better. I'm gonna get Alan Hearns next. Out of these guys, he is the only guy who's the wide receiver 1. Yeah. Okay, so you got Des Bryant, doesn't have a team. Marquise Lee, garbage. Marquise Lee is terrible on a per target basis. Sterling Shepard, we don't need to talk about him. If you want 5 to 8 PPR points per week, go ahead and grab him. Nelson Aguilar is likely to see some regression. He played really well on a per target basis. While he is definitely a sleeper pick, because we don't know, you know, if he were to be put in a situation where he had to do more, the upside that Nelson Aguilar has is extremely high. If he goes to another team, let's say a team that has no offensive weapons that are, you know, fearful, like the Dallas Cowboys. If he went to the Dallas Cowboys, I think also his skill set would match up well with Dak Prescott's. And he was just fed targets, kind of like what Sterling Shepard was fed targets last year without Odell Beckham. Nelson Aguilar could be an absolute monster. This guy has smooth route running ability. He also has great hands with good contested catch rate, and then he also has breakaway type ability in him. So he could make a 12-yard run into, or 12-yard route into a 40-yard touchdown easily, kind of Odell Beckham-esque. But as for right now, he is still the third option behind Alshon Jeffrey and Zach Ertz, and what is going to be a good offense. But you're talking Allen Hurns, who is going to be the first option, and he was just in our wide receiver sleeper videos. I think he's another guy who's going to climb. I have my pick coming up. I'm just going to prepare. Would be starting to look at quarterback. I think Drew Brees is super undervalued. I picked Drew Brees as the probably going to be Super Bowl MVP. Spoiler, I do think that the Saints are most likely to win the Super Bowl next year. I think they were very close to it. Had they beaten Stephon Diggs and the Minnesota Vikings, as you know, Stephon Diggs had that last second catch, then this would have been a completely different story. We wouldn't have known how it would have panned out. I think that they would have given the Eagles a really tough run for their money. Nick Chubb is excellent value at this point. I think I'm going to go Nick Chubb and then Kenneth Dixon. I don't like having two running backs on the same team, but they're not handcuffs. A handcuff is going to be someone like having, let's see. I'm going to take my pick. I'm going to go Kenneth Dixon. I can take next round. I'm going to take Drew Brees. So a handcuff's having like a Melvin Gordon and an Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler is not going to have standalone value until Melvin Gordon gets hurt. Now, Kenneth Dixon, he is more than likely going to be the passing down specialist. Last year, people were high on Kenneth Dixon when there was even Danny Woodhead was on the roster, right? And Danny Woodhead came in knowing he was going to be the receiving specialist. So Kenneth Dixon was still being taken higher than his ADP is right now. So now you have no Danny Woodhead, no receiving threat. Alex Collins did prove to be versatile and potentially be able to do that, but I just think that receptions can easily go Kenneth Dixon's way. Okay, let's take a look at Allen Hurns, wide receiver. I want to see where he's gone from, and this is a cool tool. You guys want to see where the hype's going, like players who are rising or falling. That's how you can know. Like if a player is at an ADP but he's falling, just know that he has the ability to fall come draft day. So, or if a guy's rising, like a Kerryon Johnson, just know when it comes draft day, people are probably going to reach for him. Okay, so Hurns went from the 10-11, so basically the 11th round pick, to the 904. So he's gone up about, a round and a half. I expect that to continue to climb. So wide receiver, I do have to start getting some wide receivers here. I love Christian Kirk. I mean, I don't need wide receivers. I got Devin Funchess, Allen Hurns. I think I'd rather stack up on running backs. I do want Kenneth Dixon now. Okay, so let's take a look at the team so far. I did kind of go tight end and quarterback early. Let's see. Well, it's unfortunate. I love Chris Godwin, but I think you're going to be able to get him on waivers, so there's no need to draft him. James Washington, I wouldn't take that early. Let's see running backs around. I'm just kind of scoping everything out. I think Chris Carson's fine. Nyheim Hines for sure is going to be my next pick. So I've got a ton of running backs, and that's kind of how I normally do my draft. I normally go really running back heavy at the end, because wide receivers, they just don't get injured as often. If you have a solid 4 or 5 that you can rotate between, you're going to be fine all season long. You might pick up one off waivers, one might get injured, but even when they get injured, normally you just have them ride the bench for a few weeks and then they come back. Wide receivers having season-ending injuries is not as common as running backs. But back to my roster, I did take Drew Brees. I think he was in the 11th round though, so I don't think that was like super early. I just think that he's going to be an excellent value come draft day. Kyle Rudolph is somebody I've been targeting in every league, just like Devin Funchess I've been targeting in every league. Allen Hurns might make that list eventually. I just don't know. I want to see a little bit more from him. Take a look at some defenses. Love the Chargers defense. But yeah, I've got a really strong wide receiver core, I believe. Mike Evans, Alshon Jeffrey, Devin Funchess, Allen Hurns. I do need one more running wide receiver to shore that up. I'm going to get the Saints defense though. I really like the Saints defense this year. Like I said, I think the Saints are probably going to win the Super Bowl, and it's not because I think that Drew Brees is going to be this, beast. I think that they're just getting better on every area. They lost Mark Ingram, yes, but they brought in Cameron Meredith to an already good offense, and the offense isn't the question. The defense really needs to perform in order for them to be a Super Bowl contender. But they brought in Patrick Robinson, who was already on the team, who has chemistry with this team. They brought in a new linebacker from Dallas, who is actually one of their best defensive players, if you ask me. So what's already a good defense with Cameron Jordan, Marcus Lattimore. There's just Marshawn Lattimore, I'm sorry. Forgive me for that. But there's just so many good options at every position on that team. My last pick, while I would normally go with a high upside guy in Terrell Pryor, and a sleeper guy in Chris Godwin, these guys are players who I wouldn't be afraid to drop. I am going to elect to get someone like Danny Amendola, who can be a spot start. So I know normally at the later stages of the draft, you always want to get a guy with a potential top 20 upside. A guy who, if an injury happens, he can be top 20. Or if, everything falls his way, he could also be top 20. Danny Amendola is not that guy. But considering I had all these values fall to me at the running back position, Nyheim Hines, you have to get him. Kenneth Dixon, Nick Chubb, all these guys fell. And then at that point, I basically sacrificed some receiver depth, which you don't really need. I just mentioned it. Mike Evans, Alshon Jeffrey, Devin Funchess, Allen Hurns. But I do need a guy who, if I do need to put in, can score points. And I know I mentioned Sterling Shepard's like a 5 to 8 PPR points. I think Danny Amendola filling in that Jarvis Landry role does have more upside. I'm going to grab a kicker. Let's see. Which one would I want? I like Ryan Suckup this year, but I am going to go with Minnesota's kicker. The reason I'm going with Minnesota's kicker is because we've seen Kirk Cousins struggle in the red zone, and we've also seen that this offense is proven to be a really good offense. So they're going to be moving the ball a lot. Their defense is going to put them in position to have short yardage or short field. So basically, even if the offense goes 3 and out after the defense makes a turnover or a stop or even a punt where they only have to move 20, 30, 40 yards to be in field goal range, I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities for the Minnesota Vikings kicker to be out on the field, thus making them a good option. When it comes to kickers, you do just want to kind of run those scenarios in your head. It's a kicker. You're going to drop them for someone anyway. It's really not a big deal. You're going to get one off waivers, but when you're going into the draft, you want a reason for every player that you're drafting, and that is my reasoning. Now, I did notice I did make a couple mistakes here, so before you guys roast me, I noticed I not only got Alex Collins and Kenneth Dixon, but I forgot I drafted Marlon Mack and I got Nyheim Hines. Had I known that Nyheim Hines, I still don't mind drafting Kenneth Dixon and Alex Collins, because I do think Kenneth Dixon does have the potential to be a receiving specialist, which does hold value in PPR leagues. But Nyheim Hines I would not have drafted if I got Marlon Mack, because we talked about avoiding handcuffs, and I think Nyheim Hines is actually a handcuff. There's no problem getting handcuffs when they're not for the running back that you own. So let's say instead of Marlon Mack I had Lamar Miller. Getting Nyheim Hines would have been an excellent pick here. But this is why we do mock drafts. We're learning. But getting Marlon Mack here and Nyheim Hines, there is no realistic way where both of them can be fantasy relevant. There's no realistic way. And if they are both fantasy relevant, they're not going to be guys that you want to start. They're both going to be averaging about 8 or 9 points. They're not going to be good because they're basically going to be filling a similar role. Now, on the other hand, I just would have avoided him. If I had Lamar Miller, I would have taken him. But if I remembered that I had Marlon Mack, I probably would have opted for another guy, even like a Matt Breida or just, you know, some other type of handcuff. Or I probably would have went receiver, because I told you guys I went Danny Amendola because I need a guy with Allen Hurns, with Alshon Jeffrey, Mike Evans, and Devin Funchess. Those are 4 really solid guys who are going to be, each one's the number 1 in their offense. Mike Evans the number 1, Alshon Jeffrey's the number 1, Devin Funchess and Allen Hurns, they're the number 1 option in their offense. But 4 receivers is not enough. You want 5 solid receivers. And Danny Amendola, I needed to know his role was secure. Once you start getting into your 6th receiver, completely upside. You know, don't worry about it. But I'm 1 injury away from having bye weeks completely destroy me and having to drop a player to start them. If I get 1 injury and a bye week, then I'm already forced into potentially dropping one of these guys. So I needed Danny Amendola. Had I known I had Marlon Mack, I would have opted for probably another receiver, and I would have been able to grab a high upside guy instead of Danny Amendola. But other than that, I really think this team is great. One of the strengths I think of this team that I don't normally have is having a good quarterback and a great tight end. So having someone like Drew Brees, who I think is going to improve on his numbers from last season, I think he's going to be a very consistent, like, quarterback 7, quarterback 8. And you know, he was a quarterback 8 last year, but he wasn't he didn't really perform. He didn't really have any highs, and I do think the highs are what's gonna happen this year. And I know if I said he was consistent but not that great and he was quarterback 8 last season, then that means he's going to be similar this season. No, well, it was a down year for quarterbacks as a whole. I think the quarterback 8 finish is going to still be good for about another 3 to 4 more points per game. So I think Drew Brees has definitely plenty of opportunity to increase on his production from last year. And then Kyle Rudolph is probably one of my favorite picks in the entire draft. Kirk Cousins has averaged about 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns to the tight end position the past 3 seasons, and that's including not just Jordan Reed, that's including all their tight ends that they had throughout that span. So I think Kyle Rudolph is going to be as locked and loaded into a consistent every week producer as there is. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. I really hoped you enjoyed. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. We thank you all for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.